E-commerce in the West never really evolved beyond the stuff that we invented in the end of the 90s.
If you're operating in the West as a brand, let's put this arrogance about China aside and really have an honest look at what they're doing.
All the trends that I was looking for in the US and not finding there anymore, they're happening in China, and nobody here in the West knows anything about this.
What can we drive as lessons from these Chinese disruptors to make sure that we are well suited for the future?
Just copying or finding an idea from China and then trying the same here without adapting it to our specific needs, cultural prerequisites and stuff, that usually doesn't work. And that's something that we have to learn from China again.
Welcome to another episode of the EGN Podcast. I'm your host, Efe von Thenen. Today we're focusing on a market that's not just growing, it's defining the future of digital business, China. If you think you know global e-commerce, but haven't looked closely at China, think again, as you might be missing the most crucial piece of the puzzle. The strategies driving China's digital ecosystem are setting the pace for the rest of the world. Here's the reality. As we reflect on how we've been selling online for over 20 years, it's clear that the core e-commerce experience has been pretty much the same in the West. Meanwhile, in China, everything is different and much more agile. Maybe it's time to rethink how we approach e-commerce altogether. If we want to stay competitive, we will need to pay attention. Our guest today is Björn Ognibeni, a leading expert on digital transformation. With an extensive experience advising top brands since 20 years, Björn will share how businesses can apply Chinese innovations to succeed in their own markets. This isn't just a discussion, it's a wake-up call. We're going beyond theory to give you actionable insights that can transform your approach to e-commerce starting today. Björn, welcome to our show. Very, very nice to have you here. You're also from Hamburg, and I appreciate you coming here and having this conversation with us. Super excited about all kinds of topics that we're going to cover today. But without getting into that, I want to first and foremost give you the floor to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Björn Ognibeni, living in Hamburg for like 20 years or so, 24 actually. And yeah, I've been working on the intersection of digital innovation and marketing, sales, customer service, and stuff like this for about the same period of time.
Yeah.
And my imaginary job title is practical visionary. The idea is I always try to find new, interesting stuff that is not in the mainstream yet, but where I think that it will end up in the mainstream and will become more important for more companies. And then that's where the practical part comes in. I help my customers and clients to do actually something with it. So
Yeah.
I don't call myself speaker or something like this, although I'm doing a lot of speaking.
Yeah.
But I'm more a doer. Yeah, I'm more trying to do actually things with these trends and then do the speaking part about stuff that's I've actually done.
I think the boring title for you would be like also 20 years a consultant. You know, you've helped many companies make sense of digital transformation. But I think even like a more creative title could be some sort of a fortune teller, because like you're involving yourself, like you're dealing with the future and all kinds of trends that might exist elsewhere, such as China. And they will inevitably have an impact, or they will probably disrupt, or if not right now, our own markets. So super excited to get into that conversation. And maybe I can start by asking you how you developed this interest in China.
Well, actually, I, being a practical visionary, I also always need new visions, right? And for this, I used to go to the US quite regularly every year to South by Southwest and events like this. And it used to be that you came back from South by Southwest with an app on your phone that the whole world will be talking about for the next year. Yeah. And that stopped happening, I don't know, in 2014 or something like that. And since then, I mean, AI now is, of course, an exception, but since then, there's not much new stuff happening here in the West.
Yeah.
All the stuff that we're using now, like iPhone, Facebook, Instagram, and all this, I think it was founded around 2007.
Yeah.
And the question is, where do I find new visions, new trends?
Yeah.
And after I sold my last company, I was figuring out what to do next. And then I went to China, actually together with Accenture, on one of these tours through different cities and companies. And I realized two things. First, all the trends that I was looking for in the US and not finding there anymore, they're happening in China. And nobody here in the West knows anything about this. And that's why I thought it might be a good idea to tell people here what they could learn from China, even if they have nothing to do there.
Yeah. So you were probably in Shenzhen, the new Silicon Valley, so to speak.
Actually, not.
Not yet?
No. And now I've been, but back then that was we started in Shanghai, went to Hangzhou, which is more or less the e-commerce capital of China, where Alibaba is headquartered.
Yeah.
And then we went on to Beijing.
Yeah.
And so these three cities were my first trip.
What was one concrete thing where you thought, like, okay, of course you thought, okay, there's not so much technological innovation happening here, but what was like something concrete that you thought, was it, I don't know if WeChat was a thing at that time when you, like, I don't know, what struck you as like this big disruption?
Yeah, like one thing is that I stepped out of the hotel in Shanghai, which is one of the biggest cities of the world, and everything was very quiet around me. And I realized that's because most of the stuff that's happening around me is already electrified.
Yeah.
Especially the motor scooters. If you go to an Asian city, usually you hear lots of motor scooters and everything is very noisy. A city like Shanghai or Shenzhen or Beijing, for that matter, they have probably the same amount of motor scooters per person as Bangkok has. But they are already electrified, so they're really pretty quiet.
Even the buses.
Yeah, and the buses as well, taxis. But that was in 2018. So back then already there was a lot of electrified cars on the streets. Yeah, and nowadays it's more for the new cars that are being sold. More than 50% are NEVs, new energy vehicles.
Yeah,
and so they are not talking about, does it make sense to electrify my car? They're just doing it.
Yeah. I guess we can later on in this conversation, if we have some time, I'd be curious to also look at structural differences comparing the West to Asia, because I think I'm following you on LinkedIn for some time now, and okay, Trump got shot, right? I love that post from you. So Trump gets shot. This bullet passes right by his ear. And then you post this thing like, there's already a t-shirt with Trump with the American flag, this like iconic image captured by a photographer. And they even made a t-shirt from this photo within like 3-4 hours after the incident. And then you talked about China's speed, and I think that's an important thing we should talk about.
But there's another interesting angle to that. I think there was a AP or some kind of press agency photo that we all know now, and they took it and put this on stuff that you can put photos on, coffee mugs, T-shirts, whatever. And of course, they didn't have the right to use these photographs. And when I posted this to LinkedIn, there were a lot of comments, people saying, "Hey, you see, that's what's happening in China. They don't care about our laws and not caring about copyright." And the funny thing was, a few minutes later, some of my Chinese friends also commented and said, yeah, but Taobao, one of the e-commerce platforms from Alibaba, they took this all down because of the rights issues.
Yeah.
And that was actually an interesting case for seeing how quickly and how effectively copyright is enforced actually in these days in China. And a couple of days later, I read an article somewhere else that on Amazon, they still sell these T-shirts, because they were not able to get these down as quickly as Taobao does.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting way to understand what misunderstandings we have, right? Because they think it's a lawless society. They do whatever they want. Actually, like for example, copyright laws, they get enforced.
Yeah. That's totally true, and there's a lot of misconception about the Chinese players that we will talk about today. For example, in the field of e-commerce, we often talk about social marketplaces such as TikTok with TikTok Shop, for example, and also Shein and TEMU that are kind of disrupting the German e-commerce market. But then again, in the discussions within our bubble in e-commerce, there's often the mentioning, hey, they're not respecting our regulations. They're like just kind of creating an unfair disadvantage for themselves, tapping into loopholes, blah, blah. And I want to kind of demystify some of these things with you because I trust that you are pretty knowledgeable about these players. So how do you... I've taken a look at the global top marketplaces, right? So, right, you have all the way on top, of course, Amazon with around, I think, 700 billion or something, if I'm not mistaken, GMV. And then you have the rest of the 5 are Asian players. And you see something like some platform like TEMU arising out of nowhere, pretty much, like 2022 and 2023 in Germany. And then becoming like everywhere you go, they're spending like 1.2 billion in meta ad spends and having lots of campaigns. And of course, they're part of a larger company that they can afford that. Larger company being Pinduoduo, making 34 billion revenue into last year. It's so for me that they're heavily disrupting. I think we haven't seen anything like this in a long time. They're heavily disrupting the German market. How do you see the Asian players, like in general? And how do you see this expansion to Germany?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that when I was in China for the first time in 2018, we went to Hangzhou, to the Alibaba headquarters, and talked to people there from Alibaba, and they told us that they are not really interested in doing anything in Germany. Yeah, they saw Germany totally as a sourcing market, where they find interesting stuff to sell on their platforms in China, but China had so much growth and so much money to make, there was no reason to go anywhere else. And that was pretty much the situation for quite some time. And nowadays, China no longer has this growth. And a lot of these companies suddenly started to think, where do we find new growth markets? And Pinduoduo was one of the first that actually one of these big e-commerce players who thought, well, let's try to sell stuff in the West. Shein was a small startup. So they never actually did any business in China. They always sold stuff in the West. So for them, that was totally normal to do that. But for Pinduoduo, that was a pretty revolutionary move, so to say. I think they started in September 2020. And it took them, I think, about 10 months from having the first idea to having about 1 million GMV per day. So that's China's speed.
That's insane.
That's pretty interesting. And the interesting thing also is that companies like JD, for example, which is after Alibaba the second biggest player,
Yes.
hasn't made any moves outside of China, really. I mean, smaller ones, but nothing on the scale as TEMU. And there's still a lot of stuff waiting there. Yeah. Also, Alibaba has AliExpress, which has been around for years, but never was as successful as TEMU is right now. So, but they are also starting, as we've seen during the Olympics and the Euro Championships,
Sponsorships.
that suddenly Alibaba or AliExpress starting to appear more and more on our screens. And the interesting thing here is that all these big Chinese companies that have their stocks in the US mainly, I think, or Hong Kong, they need to find a new growth story. And now they look at Pinduoduo, they look at ByteDance with TikTok and Shein, and see two things. First, there's great growth opportunity in the West.
Yeah.
That's these companies always can discuss how profitable this is at this point, but they really are able to deliver real growth to their companies by selling stuff in the West. That's one thing. And the other thing is all the established companies in the West find no ways to compete with them. Where they're too slow. They are not really adapt to a new situation. And that's a very interesting, compelling setup for any Chinese company. So
maybe it is. I totally agree with you in terms of profitability. There's growth in terms of like selling, but they're also spending a lot in marketing. And, it's like, I think arguably TEMU is not a profitable business.
Yeah, actually, there are analyst reports that in the US, I think that their plan was to be profitable this year and break even, next year and break even this year. But the reports are that they are already profitable in the US, where they started this year already with a small profit.
Yeah.
And they will be more than break even on a global scale. So they are ahead of their plans, actually, if these reports are true. So it's not like this is they have no way to become profitable with these prices.
Yeah, totally. And I think this might even be the beginning of a larger Chinese wave, perhaps. And you mentioned AliExpress, Alibaba, and JD and other players, and the stagnation in the Chinese market. If this trend continues, why wouldn't these players invest heavily in also the Western markets, where we will see in a bit there are considerable weaknesses in terms of speed, in terms of integrating all these AI-based personalization components into the journey, just simply a complete different customer journey that they bring to the table. And I feel we have perhaps a lot to learn from them. There are different opinions within e-commerce. Hey, just ignore that. We've also heard recently some opinions like, hey, you should just ignore the Chinese players, do your thing, invest in your brand, whatever. But I think it's always worthwhile to take a closer look of what's coming.
And especially we're here in the e-commerce context, but this is not happening on e-commerce only. Yeah. If I go to a car manufacturer in Germany, they will also complain nowadays about China. Machine manufacturers are suddenly realizing that after, 50, 60 years of dominating the global market with our machines, that suddenly now Chinese companies are appearing. So it's in every area that Chinese companies suddenly start to become competitors on a global scale. And it's probably the same reason. These Chinese companies build these big machines that now churn out all their products. They are not finding the growth that they need in China, so we go outside. That's
definitely
happening all over. So all over industries. That's something that we have to keep in mind. If we're just focusing on e-commerce, it's not an e-commerce thing. It's something that's is happening in many industries.
Yeah, totally. But going back to e-commerce for the sake of this podcast, I think you probably bought stuff from TEMU, right? So
Hmm.
I think my analysis, at least, is that for the younger generation that is born into this gamification world with social commerce and all these things, I think it's pretty much given that they're used to these pop-ups or like personalized offers and all these things that annoy me with 38 years old at the time of this recording. Honestly, it's not really the way I typically shop. So I've tried it. Of course, I ordered something and just to go through the journey. But there's a younger generation, Gen Z and the likes, and that can deal with it pretty well, and just they might be price sensitive, and they want to just discover some new deals out of the blue and go there with a complete different intent than the one that you have when you go to Amazon to search for something. What are the main differences in how we shop on these platforms versus the West?
Yeah, the interesting thing here is that e-commerce in the West never really evolved beyond the stuff that we invented in the end of the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazon and all the companies that were around that time thought about why do we need e-commerce, and their solution was e-commerce makes shopping easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I no longer have to go to a shop, look for certain merchandise. If I don't find it, I have to go to the next shop. That was not a very pleasant process if I needed something desperately. So if I buy it conveniently online, it gets delivered to my doorstep and I have it.
Yeah.
So, which is actually a pretty good use case. And that was the one that we was working on, or that we are working on actually since the end of 90s.
Yeah.
And
it's the typical product detail page.
That's
convenient
exactly.
checkout.
Search-driven e-commerce that starts with a consumer who's looking for something.
Yes.
Then he finds product lists, then he finds a product detail page, and he finds something that he likes, and then he hopefully has a very efficient checkout process, and then it gets delivered and
frictionless checkout.
Stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's something that works perfectly fine, and that's also what the Chinese started with.
Yeah,
I don't know when, back then. But over time, because China is very creative and they always try to find new things, somebody came up with the idea of we make shopping exciting. Yeah, our job is to make sure that people find products or find out what they need instead of find what they need. And the first use case is more like Google. Yeah, I'm looking for a specific answer to a question that I have. The discovery-driven e-commerce model that comes out of this exciting thinking is more like Instagram. Yeah, you can go to Instagram or TikTok to look for a specific picture or video, but you most likely go there to look at pictures or look at videos. Yeah, and so discover the stuff that you need.
Yeah,
and that's a use case that is right now pretty much underserved. Yeah, there's no, for example, feed-based e-commerce company that just go to browse. And it's kind of funny because that used to be the use case for physical retail.
Yeah.
Browsing through a store is nothing very exotic. It's a very normal way how to use this. This kind of infrastructure called our Innenstädte. Yeah, and I just go in a store and try to get entertained by looking at stuff.
Yeah.
And we never really thought about how to do this online. And that's one of the stuff that we can, or perhaps even should, learn from China, how to do this.
Yeah. And I think one thing you said is, I think, also worthwhile mentioning again, that this discovery-driven commerce is intrinsically very, very different than what we're used to. So let's take TikTok as an example. The algorithm just learns from your behavior, your preferences, your likes, like whatever you spend more time on. So basically, it's just a typical case that you see almost everywhere now. But then that combined with live experiences, someone actually presenting or like making it very attractive, or like you are just listening. I think this live component has been massive in China for the last couple of years anyway. And there's been trials from TikTok maybe 2 years ago where they tried to introduce live formats, and they tested it in some markets. For some reason, it's mostly Spain that these companies test these on. And then they figured out the market's not ready, right? So, and then the similar thing with TikTok Shop being delayed a little bit. But I think for me, it looks like kind of inevitable that such formats will have an impact and will become more mainstream. You already see this on TikTok. Since TikTok Shop has been activated in other markets, if they're a global content creator, they're mentioning in their feed, hey, go to TikTok Shop and then do this and that. Whereas you're like, I don't have TikTok Shop, like in the transition. But it's really, really different, right?
Yeah, the live shopping is actually a pretty good example.
Yeah.
And it's also a pretty good example for a lot of misunderstandings. We always think that Chinese copy, that they take our great IP, our great inventions, and then copy them.
Yeah.
And usually Chinese never copy, because copying means they just reproduce stuff that they've seen anywhere else without changing it. What they are doing is learning. Yeah, that the first iteration looks like our stuff, but the next one is probably already ahead.
Yeah.
And we, on the other hand side, we like to copy. Yeah, we looked at live shopping on Taobao Live and all these live shopping platforms in 2021, I think. And we said, okay, looks like this is an interesting thing. We do the same. And they actually copied what Chinese were doing, putting people in front of a camera and trying to sell stuff.
Even during Corona,
yeah,
feeds from Chibo, Höfner, and so on and so forth.
And funny thing, it didn't work. Yeah, nobody cared about what companies would like to show to them.
Yeah,
and the question is why. Yeah, and we thought, well, it's cultural difference. The Chinese like to watch live stuff, and we don't. And I think the problem that we had is we weren't learning, we were just copying. And learning also involves adapting the stuff that I'm seeing anywhere to our markets here. And I think discovery-driven e-commerce is a prerequisite for live shopping to work. Yeah, if the customers are trained to go to a shop to find something, what they need, what they are looking for, like I want to buy a pair of socks, I have this query field, I type in socks.
Yeah.
Then I find the product listings of socks, and then the shop comes, hey, look at this nice live feed that we have by people selling socks. And I said, no, I just want to buy the socks. I don't care about the live feed. So I need to have consumers to change their behavior, the reasons why they come to the shop. Like, for example, I want to just get entertained by looking at stuff in the shop. If I don't have this, people are just don't care about this live video stuff.
Yeah.
And that was something that was misunderstood in 21 when we only used this live shopping format to spice up the search-driven stores that we have. And what TikTok is doing is basically they have discovery-driven content users. They go there to get entertained.
Now they're commercializing.
Yeah, and if they just swipe through somebody who wants to sell stuff and looks interesting, they stay there. Yeah, and they look at this and they buy this. Yeah, if they like it.
Yeah.
And that's why TikTok Shop is actually successful. The interesting thing is now I just read that TikTok Shop also has run into some problems because the merchants are not able to churn out all the content that TikTok needs to get a steady stream of interesting videos.
Yeah.
So that's the problem that we are having now on this field.
Yeah.
But just copying or finding an idea from China and then trying the same here without adapting it to our specific needs, cultural prerequisites and stuff, that usually doesn't work. And that's something that we have to learn from China again, that first try things out and then iterate and try to get better, and not trying it once and then say it didn't work, so we just forget it to do the stuff that we've been doing for 20 years.
Björn, you mentioned try and fail, and to try and improve, iterate. This is totally true. And I think this is also, there's an interplay how you do that with AI also. The way, my feeling is the way we use AI in the West is like heavily dedicated to how you market a product. So you can use AI to make better campaigns and like reach the right customer within the journey and all these things. But I have the feeling that the factory to customer model employed by TEMU and Shein employ AI throughout the production process. So this could mean you have like a sample of 100 products that you tested among your customers. If there's demand for these products, you produce more. So which means like, hey, it didn't convert or it didn't generate demand, then you move on to something else. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a C2M model, consumer to manufacturer. It's also already pretty old in China.
Yeah.
And it's actually probably the wrong term, because it's not consumer to manufacturer. It's more like manufacturer to consumer. So it's
that's what I meant, like factory to customer.
Yeah, exactly. And another problem is that we usually put Shein and TEMU into one bucket.
Yes.
Which is not a good way to approach this. Because the stuff that you are talking about, that's the Shein model. That's supply chain as a service. I think that's what they call it. Where a normal fashion company is trying to make a guess what they will be able to sell next season. They order this from the supply chain, they get it delivered, and then they try their best. Yeah, and 30 to 40% of the stuff that they actually got produced and put in the store doesn't get sold, and they have to, get rid of it one way or the other. And the C2M model tries to revert this process. Nothing gets, only a small number of items actually get produced, but what Shein is doing, they are showing up to 10,000 new designs every day in their app to the consumer, and then the consumer interacts with this. Yeah, like likes it, shares it, sends it to friends, put it in on lists or in their shopping basket, wherever. Yeah, and this generates data, and then you use this data to make an educated guess by an AI probably, which products will be able to sold shortly after stuff that's happening in the app. And that's a way more efficient process. And while 30 to 40% of the stuff that gets produced never gets sold with the old-fashioned industries, Shein says that's below 1% of the stuff that's happening to the stuff that they are having. When they start to have to file for their IPO, we will get a lot of data to see if it's actually true.
Yeah.
But no matter if it's like 5% or 1%, it's a much better process. And the interesting thing here is it's not about fashion, it's not about e-commerce, but it's about the way how you structure a company.
Yeah.
Because our companies are structured in silos. Yeah, there are people, there's one department that's in charge of the app, one of the departments doing marketing, one department is doing operations, and there are people who are buying stuff, the sourcing department, and they are not really talking to each other. Yeah, they never had to. Yeah, the sourcing department bought something and put this on the desk. The operations people tried to make sure that's in the store, and then the marketing people tried to sell it. And
I've been part of that, so I I can confirm.
So that's how we work. And we never be able to have a model like Shein does within this thinking. We have to change the thinking actually.
Yeah.
To integrate all this on one IT platform. So Shein basically is not a fashion company, it's an IT platform. Yeah, it's an holistic ERP system that integrates the front end of the consumer, also known as the mobile app, with the last element of the supply chain.
Yeah.
To make everything work in sync. So, and you can use this approach for nearly every industry probably.
Could it be a comparison, perhaps? I always have to. I watched the evolution of YouTube with great enthusiasm back in the day, and I think it was 2006 that they got merged with Google, acquired by Google for I think like 1.5 billion or something. But then the argument why many of the media companies were not so interested in YouTube back then was that they were assuming that the consumer is a couch potato and they wouldn't produce so much content. And when I look at the platform Shein, they also, I can imagine you are a fashion designer and you might just have a design, just work with Shein and just get that produced. And maybe it's the YouTube for fashion.
Exactly, yeah. That's actually a blog post that I had about a year ago.
I read it, yeah.
Okay, so basically, if you have a machine like Shein and you want to see where you go with this, why not use the YouTube model for this, where a great creative designer in Nairobi or Bogota or whatever can upload their designs, go through a certain process, and everybody worldwide can buy this stuff. Yeah, and monetize the creativity of everyone worldwide. No, that's a pretty interesting perspective for a company like Shein. Is actually has a lot of reputation problems nowadays. Yeah, because they are focusing so much on being extremely cheap. And one other problem that we have when we look at these companies, also TEMU, is that, or if you look at Amazon, as we just said, it's more or less stagnant for 20 years. Yeah, the basic model of e-commerce never really changed. And we expect the same from companies like Shein and TEMU. We try to understand what's happening now. And then we say, okay, they probably will do the same thing for the next foreseeable future. Yeah, that they won't change. But the problem is they are constantly changing. Yeah. Like right now we are complaining about all these little packages that are coming directly from China with TEMU, getting by plane, getting imported into the EU.
If I'm not mistaken, 200,000 a day or something.
Something like that, yeah, even more, I think. But while we are complaining about this, TEMU is already changing the model. That's called a fully managed model, and the different model is a semi-managed model where they actually sell stuff on their platform that's already imported.
Yeah.
So basically, it's nothing much different from a marketplace on Amazon or Otto. So the main problems that we are talking about right now with TEMU, they probably won't happen or won't be that much of a problem in a year or so, because they are constantly evolving. And that's something that we have really a problem to wrap our heads around, that these companies are not stagnant. Yeah, that we have to anticipate where they want to go, not where they are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I definitely want to go back to just for a minute or two is you mentioned Shein and TEMU are very different in terms of their business model. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for those of us mere mortals that don't know them as well as you do?
Yeah, first of all, every company is doing everything in China. So it's not either or. But Shein is doing the supply chain as a service model, mostly focusing on fashion. But they also have a marketplace business where they sell all the stuff that you see on TEMU. I think it's not so important for them, but you have to keep in mind it's not either or. It's also happening there too. TEMU, on the other hand side, is selling stuff that's already produced. Pinduoduo had something that was called the New Brand Initiative. That was actually a C2M model, but they did this in China, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. I'm not sure how important it is these days, but that's not what TEMU is about. TEMU is about factories in China have stuff laying around and they sell this on TEMU. Might also be merchants, whatever, but these kind of products get sold through the TEMU platform. And there are two different ways to do this. One is the fully managed model that I just talked about, where merchants or factories deliver this to a TEMU warehouse in China. And it's lying in the warehouse, but it's belonging to the merchant or the factory, not to TEMU. And then TEMU, and that's gives me a certain price that TEMU will pay me when TEMU is able to sell the stuff. And the real or the most important difference then to a marketplace model like Amazon is that TEMU then decides at what price they want to sell it. It could be that they sell it at a much higher price and make a nice little margin. It could also be that they sell it at a lower price than what I get paid, and they subsidize the price because they think it's a good way to attract new consumers or new customers.
Or keep them longer or something.
So
kind of like Airbnb with their dynamic pricing model, perhaps.
But on Amazon, the merchant decides the price of his products that they have on the listing. In TEMU, that's something that you have to keep in mind. The TEMU, the company, is actually deciding the price. And that also was the reason why one of the reasons why Pinduoduo became so successful in China. They bought last season's iPhones on some kind of gray market and then sold it with a nice subsidized price on their platform. And everybody in China was suddenly talking about the place where you get cheap iPhones.
Awesome.
And it cost them a lot of money. That was not profitable. But for them, that was like a media spending. And it worked out quite nicely. And they still do this on TEMU for certain products. With others, because they are already drawing a profit, they sell at a margin. That's something that nobody really knows where the margins are. But right now, what I think what TEMU is not doing really well, they have all these products. It's a mess. You find all this stuff. There are some products that are actually very low quality. There are others that are actually pretty good quality. And for the consumer, it's pretty difficult to find the stuff that is really good. And all the games that we were talking about earlier, the question is TEMU successful because of them or despite of them? There's probably a lot of Wheel of Fortune things that a lot of consumers don't like. They like the low prices, so they are okay with them clicking them away. But it's not actually the reason why TEMU is successful.
Never thought about it like that. I thought this is intrinsically they're like
they are. I think TEMU is just trying things out, and they are using the approaches that are successful in China. They're doing this here, and they are iterating. When they see certain games probably work, so they keep them on. Others don't work, so they get rid of them.
You want to know how that makes me feel? I mean, as I said, I'm probably a bit older than the target audience at first. But the way I feel is that I'm being fooled somehow, like there are all these games that are obviously there to kind of manipulate my decision-making, coherent decision-making, where I even almost have the suspicion, are these like dark patterns that we've also seen elsewhere? Like this has been seen in even retail stores. Like when you go to a large, I don't want to name them, but like a large retail store selling televisions, like LCD, not LCD anymore, but just screens, flat screens, right? And when you go there, you see like in a huge price, like huge TV with a very expensive price, and then you're like, who the hell affords something like this, you know? And then keep looking, and you see something extremely cheap, but obviously not so great quality, and you land somewhere in between, whereas it's like the decoy effect, right?
Yeah.
So you feel paying around 2,000 euro for a TV is actually not that bad at all. Whereas this whole journey has been manipulated through this like obvious dark pattern, and my feeling is that there's a notion that I'm sensing, like when I go on this platform. What do you think? Like, are we being manipulated, or is it just like part of the game?
I mean, that's one of the funny things, right? Of course we are manipulated, but everywhere. It's not that the evil Chinese are trying to manipulate nice, annoying Western consumers. I mean,
Yeah.
every company is doing something that we now call dark patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are specific laws that you have to consider, and if you offer a price that's actually not true, you're breaking the law, and that's something that should be enforced. But there are other things that are perfectly fine within the law,
Yeah.
but they are annoying customers, and
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But being manipulated is probably nothing that is exclusive to Chinese companies. It's
Yeah.
totally normal way of life.
That's a
Yeah,
fair
and
point. A
yeah.
couple of years ago, we were talking about a big hotel search engine actually manipulating the users by telling them, hey, only 3 of them are available, kind of like creating this FOMO effect, whereas this wasn't true at all. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think this, what you said is quite true, that this is not particularly an isolated Chinese phenomenon. Rather, it's any company that's looking to tap into great.
What's interesting with TEMU is that now all these Western competitors and their trade associations are trying to make sure that that TEMU is no longer able to do this. Yeah, send you like I don't know, 5 emails a day telling you that your grandmother will die if you don't buy this product within the next 10 minutes or something like this. Yeah, and of course, TEMU will probably comply with all this, but in the end, what we will have is a very efficient e-commerce platform with hundreds of millions of users, interesting products, and good prices that gets rid of all the annoying stuff. And I'm not sure if a competitor wants this. Yeah, because in the end, it probably will make TEMU better and a better service. And of course, there are also a lot of drawbacks with TEMU, like products that are actually dangerous to consumers. And these are the kind of stuff that they should get rid of, and they probably also want to, by themselves, are trying to get rid of those products.
Give me some examples, like plastic that is not compliant with the European regulations, stuff like this, kids' toys.
Stuff that draws power and you get electrocuted by. I'm not sure if this kind of problems actually exists, but that's something that you get read about. Yeah,
this is what I would assume, and you know,
and that's probably also what a lot of consumers now expect, why they shy away from buying TEMU. But if we, in a few months, will have headlines that TEMU will comply with all these laws and all the products are safe now, I'm not sure if I'm a competitor of TEMU. I want this. This message should be out there. Yeah, for the consumer, it's much better, and of course, it's something that we do need a level playing field where all the regulations. That all companies have to comply with all the regulations. That's nothing we should talk about. That should be totally normal. And if we want to enforce this, and we should, then that's a good thing. But I think it's also a good thing for TEMU.
Now, I think we've covered the differences quite well. So now what I want to ask you is, let's assume, I mean, for the low price range products, I think no brand like mushroom brands, those types of products, it's pretty certain they're disrupting the market. But when you look at the German e-commerce market, you have a lot of brands with high profit margins that don't exist elsewhere in that form. Like the consumer is willing to pay these very high margins for a premium product. How do you see these types of brands being challenged by Asian players in the near future?
Yeah, that's another misunderstanding. Yeah, that China equals with cheap. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Demystify it, please.
yeah, I mean, and it's true. Yeah, lots of stuff came out of China that's cheap, but also iPhones came out of China and they are not cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can also, Chinese are very much aware of history. We aren't. What we should.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Silk Road. Why is the Silk Road called Silk Road?
Because it led to silk.
Because we got silk out of China
Yeah.
for like thousands of years.
Yeah.
And silk is actually the most luxury product that you can think about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you talked about porcelain. What's porcelain called in the US? China. Why? Because we got porcelain like China out of China. Yeah. Why did Marco Polo go there? Because he wanted to get cheap plastic stuff? No, because that was the place where all the most richest people were, where all the luxury products came from. That's why that made China 500 years ago so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So China wasn't always the place where all the cheap stuff was happening. That's just happening for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And because we don't know much about history, we don't know that for the last 2,000-3,000 years before that, China was known for luxury products. And this is happening again. Yeah, there are a lot of very high quality products in fashion and in all other areas, cars, and of course also consumer electronics, where suddenly high quality products coming out of China.
Yeah.
And that will be very interesting what will happen once these probably perhaps more creative products actually end up in Western markets. Yeah, where,
With the new customer journeys that they're building.
Exactly. Yeah. Or another interesting thing is if you take a platform like Tmall, yeah, which is the brand platform of Alibaba. You have Taobao, which is a small merchant platform, and you have Tmall, which is the platform where all the brands are sold. It's actually, they have the Tmall Luxury Pavilion. That's where Gucci, Balenciaga, and all these extremely high quality luxury products are being sold that will never end up on Amazon or any of these Western platforms. That's pretty interesting because they can provide a very interesting branding experience within the e-commerce context.
Yeah.
That's something that we never really thought about. Yeah, we all have this stuff that we already discussed, this product page that looks like it's just the back-end system of a ERP system, basically. Yeah, there's nothing branding, nothing experience oriented to
nothing
this e-commerce
exciting
thing.
about it.
And what if these kind of platforms come over here, maybe selling Chinese luxury products, yeah, starting completely new trends in stagnant markets?
Yeah.
That's something that we can start thinking about. And also, like Shein, for example, the whole Shein model right now is using a very flexible production system for making efficient production systems that provides for very small prices. Yeah, that's how they use this right now. Why not use this with highly personalized products sold at a premium price? Yeah, that would work with the same system. And these are the stuff that we should think about.
Björn, I want to wrap things up by focusing on learnings from China. I mean, obviously, we are catering to a German audience among some others that want to do better e-commerce. So what can we drive as lessons from these Chinese disruptors to make sure that we are well suited for the future?
Yeah, perhaps starting with the discovery-driven e-commerce thing. And thinking about new ways to present a product. Yeah, not a product detail page with now we take out the picture and put in the video, but really finding a way to create excitement about a product in the store. That's one of the things that we can learn. What's also something that we haven't talked about, what's also very interesting, is the whole social aspect. And with social aspect, I don't mean social media, but I mean doing stuff together with people online. Buying something together with friends that I go to a store with is a learned use case that's pretty normal. We never really thought about doing this online. How can I go shopping with friends online? Never really thought about this.
Absolutely.
And if we do this, what about relationships and between my friends, but also between brands and friends, between stores and brands and friends? How can I use this? How can I build this? And that brings us to an interesting thing. It's customer dialogue. If you go into a store, or start with the other way around. If we talk about dialogue, that's always a cost problem. I used to work for companies like Deutsche Telekom, Deutsche Bahn, Volkswagen, and they all have a problem of what do we do when the customer has a complaint, has a problem. And all these systems that these companies have are driven by costs. When the customer comes in, he somehow costs us money, and we have to make sure that the whole process is efficient. If we go into a store, if a customer goes into a store, the system won't say, okay, I have to make sure that he leaves the store immediately, because if he talks to me, he's producing costs. We think that it's actually a good thing that a customer comes into a store. How can I apply this thinking to customer dialogue online? It's also a strange idea if you are organizing customer service for an online company. Because that's not how we approach things. And in China, there is no e-commerce shop that doesn't have a chat button where you can ask a question and get an answer back within seconds. And maybe these days with an AI bot on the other hand side, but the customer actually don't expect some kind of response, but actually results. And if this AI system creates results, that's fine. But if it doesn't, you have to have somebody there handling the dialogue that's not in AI. Also something that we don't do. What I always say, we have something like a CRM, customer relationship management, our relationship, but it's not really about relationships. It's about sending out newsletters mostly. And those newsletters, where do they come from? They come from an email address that says something like noreply@greatbrand.com. Because we don't want customers
it's
to
a one-directional.
Don't mail us, we mail you. And these are the kinds of thinking that we can learn in China about. And if we start doing that, probably the first Western e-commerce companies who apply these kind of lessons, they will be pretty successful here, I think.
That's a fantastic way to wrap things up. From my part, I think one of the key takeaways from this conversation is, like, especially if you're operating in the West as a brand, let's put this arrogance about China aside and really have an honest look at what they're doing, how the supply chains and how the operations are built, and about the business model, and not only focus on today, because these Chinese players, they have China speed much faster than we are here in the West, but also it's a matter of time that they will optimize certain things we're discussing here in the West. So they're focusing on the future, and we might want to do the same. So this is also another takeaway. And then you obviously shared your practical insights about, like, high profit. We talked about high profit, high margin companies, and China is no different. They're also they have those brands and empowered by a set of new customer journeys that we don't have here. So thank you so much, Björn, for being part of our show. I loved this conversation and I loved listening to you. And I encourage, as I mentioned at the beginning, Björn is a consultant, a successful consultant since 20 years. If you watch this or listen to this conversation, feel free to reach out to Björn Ognibeni on LinkedIn if you have any questions, and I'm sure you will not ignore the messages and get back to them. And
we also have monthly workshops where you can actually learn about these things on one morning, 4 hours. It's remotely done, so very easy to get to. And we have one series that's called Rethinking Digital or Digital China. We talk about more in general about what to learn from China, what we should know about China. And the other one is Rethinking E-commerce. We're actually talking for 4 hours about the stuff that we have been talking for 1 hour.
Right. I can only recommend I know the e-commerce format. I can only recommend people to check this out. Is more than encouraged to check it out. You have your own website. You have your own LinkedIn profile. So check it out and reach out to Björn if you have any questions about digital disruption, new journeys, China, and so on and so forth. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the EGN Podcast. If you found our discussion insightful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us grow and improve our content. See you next time.